Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Checkmate the Matrix. Another episode here, and we have a great guest who's got some, what would you call it? Amazing and disturbing, but very interesting information and stories to actually tell us about literally what's been going on in his life, but also with the corruption of the utilities as well as many other things. So let's crack on with it straight away. So welcome, Andrew, and how are you doing today?
All good, all smiling still, and bearing up in the face of much adversity. It's the only way you can do it.
Great, they're great to hear as well. So, I mean, does that sound sort of like what I've said there? You know, like talking about the corruption and literally the adversity that you face by trying to actually do the right thing, really.
Yeah.
You know, and trying to actually get to the bottom of corruption and trying to highlight it and helping others, and they've kind of like made a beeline for you in a way. I mean, is that kind of roughly around what's actually going on?
Absolutely. I mean, a beeline to me in a very, very big way. I perhaps should give you a bit of background into my life because it all becomes relevant. So I was brought up into poor farming background, which is where I live now, really, on a small farm. And I've always been a maverick, never fit in. And it wasn't until most of my way through my current life when the COVID scam hit in, March 20, that about a week later, I just knew it was all a scam. And then over the next few months, doing a bit of research, and my son pointed me to Pizzagate, which I knew nothing about. And then that tied in with many other things. And I suddenly realized I was born for this time. And all my life's experiences, which in the past might have looked a bit gloomy or very, negative, but they've all prepared me for today. And so always been one to take on injustice, even from a young age, taking on two lads who tried to pinch a bike off somebody and managed to frighten them the consequences, even though I was only, 5'6.5" or something. And would never let that stand in any way through life. And so there's a number of things happened over the years, which I got into kind of law-related stuff by accident in a family company I worked in, which is run by a relative of mine. And I was in there for a few years. I could have had probably a significant interest today, but it didn't fit right with my moral compass, the way they were running things. But it gave me a huge experience in life. And I got to go to the court sometimes to support the solicitors because the company were always in court for one thing or another, motoring offences for, lorries and that kind of thing. And sometimes collection of debts from people who hadn't paid. So I began to get an insight into the way the courts worked. And there was one day I thought, well, I can do this. And it dawned on me that solicitors didn't really know the law completely, but they knew procedure and they knew how to exploit it and they knew how to line their own pockets. So I started off doing one or two cases for myself against an insurance broker, and I was able to win that, and I learned the ropes over the years. And an old guide and mentor of mine, a guy called Lyon Lemos, he was really good in kind of preparing me for some of the things that I would face in later life from his own experiences. And if everybody should know the term without prejudice. Well, he took that all the way to the House of Lords. He had a lot of cojones to do so, but he was facing, I think it was South Shropshire Council, and the case can be looked up, Amos versus South Shropshire Council. And the term without prejudice was analysed heavily by the higher court. And he won his day, and he won large costs off South Shropshire Council. So learning things like that, sometimes the little guy can take on the big system, but you generally have to fight it up through the courts, where there's something which is controversial with the establishment. So as we came into through 2020, I could see that everything was wrong, and gradually I became aware of the corruption in everything. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You can see the way councils operate. You can see the way, you know, the police operate. And far from being the wonderful constables that we were brought up to respect and admire, I'll always remember the village bobby, Jimmy. When I went over to go to school, if we were a little bit cheeky, you know, he could pick you up by your ankles, tip you over, and say, "Do you really want to pursue this course of action?" And of course, you didn't. And it was a very nice way of correcting you from a very young age. So that was the police that we kind of grew up with and expected to always be on our side. But we know that, I don't know when it started really. I suppose the top levels have always been answering to government and being corrupt, but we can see it ever so much more over the last 4 years, 3 years. The COVID protests, which I was mightily pleased to be introduced to in London through 2021, and quite a number of people I know had been down in 2020. And some major names were there at the beginning, real heroes, you know, that have never backed down. They've always been there. And some have been obviously fighting the corruption and the scams and everything before that time. So, excuse me, as we went on, the number of people going to London was colossal. I mean, I think June 21, well over 1 million. Some people say over 2 million. The drone footage showed the centre of London absolutely chocked. And apparently the police had refused the protest in May 21, but everybody turned up anyway, and there's nothing they could do. And I think this was a turning point to galvanise a lot of people into saying, yeah, we can join into this kind of thing. So, yeah. So, moving forward, they then began economic terrorism against the general population by gradually and suddenly rising energy bills for people. And when you actually analysed it, Mark Steele was one of the first to do so. The wholesale price of oil, for instance, in 2008 was, I think, $140 a barrel. And yet pump prices didn't go much above about $1.19 a litre. Contrast that with the back end of 2022, sorry, the beginning of 2022, back end of 21, and oil was trading at roughly $80 to $90 a barrel, and yet the energy costs were going through the roof, in some cases doubling or even trebling. So it seemed to be there was something seriously wrong there. So I began to research to see, okay, there has to be a solution. There is always a solution. God always provides one. We just have to look. And I came upon, after researching deeply, as I'd learned to do, a set of, say, regulations, the 1989 Electricity Act, and the Ofcom guidance from February the 27th, 2020, as I recall. And in there, a small supplier of electricity was allowed to make a direct contract, peer-to-peer contract, with a small consumer, domestic consumer. When they defined small, a small supply was somebody generating under 5 megawatts, which is colossal compared to what a small domestic consumer would use. He could supply many people within that, but he could only supply up to 2.5 megawatts for domestic consumption. The rest had to go to commercial. So looking around, I managed to find various parties where they weren't getting paid for generating surplus electricity, particularly from solar, where they put large arrays in, and then found that the companies that were supposed to be paying and buying it off them weren't doing that, and so they were conned into, you know, basically a lot of expense into solar panels. It might have satisfied their own needs, but it meant that they were dumping a lot of surplus electricity into the grid. So I contacted one or two and then made an arrangement with somebody who was quite keen to explore the possibilities of selling to other domestic customers if I was to pioneer the way successfully. So we agreed a very simple contract to do so at much reduced prices, but far greater than the zero he'd been paid. And I think the trick was they tried to pay him a fraction of a penny previously to that. So I set about doing that. I cancelled my contract, which was with Octopus. I was only on a 24-hour, well, let's call it contract. It was never signed properly as it's supposed to be or anything like that. They accepted it in April 22. and they agreed to put the final meter reading in on the final bill. Now, I thought that's fine. Part of the deal with the new supplier was to get a different meter in, because we don't really know who owns the electricity meters. If they're fixed to one's property, they should really become, one's own property, because that's how the law works. If you take a place over and it has fixtures and fittings in, they tend to become yours in any transaction, any conveyancing. So one thing to go back, around about 1950, my family had paid for, in conjunction with a nearby farm, our own supply to come in, and this was to be brought across from the village. And we had to pay for all the electricity apparatus split between us, and then our final connection, which is about 50 meters from me from a transformer pole. We obviously paid the cost of that into the house. So effectively, we owned that, but that deal was made with North Eastern Electricity Board, who were a publicly owned utility and were supposed to be non-profit making. And their deal was that with the new assets, the new apparatus installed, they would have the right to supply electricity and bill it across that new line and return a tiny amount to pay for any future maintenance. Well, if you imagine brand new telegraph poles or transmission poles put into the ground, they can last upwards of 50 years. I mean, they're still out there now, and they've been in, nearly 80 years now. So that was the arrangement. When the privatization happened, there was nothing to really change that. We weren't confiscated of our assets. They weren't bought off us. We didn't give them or transfer them by deed to anybody. So we didn't even think about it. They were always our assets that somebody else was allowed to use for a small return. So going forward to April 22. So I just informed Octopus that they demanded to know who our new supplier was. And I said, well, I don't have to tell you. In the terms and conditions that Ofgem provided, the analysis of February 2020, there's no requirement for registration and there's no requirement for licensing for any small supplier, the whole purpose of which was to incentivize small suppliers to come into the market and to be able to compete against the big monopolies, and to encourage people to put in the solar and wind, I suppose, and anything else they might be generating from. There are methane producers, although they are few and far between, who generate off burning gas through engines, spark engines. So we had that situation where the government appeared to have put in place the capability to do that. And then Octopus, oh no, you're still in a contract with us unless we know your new supply. So I just said, no, you don't need to do that. There's no requirement to do so. You have to obey the law. And all I've done is made alternative arrangements. So they sent somebody around to demand access to read the meter. And I denied them. I said, I have no contract with you, please go away. And then shortly after that, they issued what is called a deadlock letter. Now, the dispute that had been running for about 3 or 4 months was, they say, we have a contract with you, and I say, oh no, you don't, because of this reason. They then issue a deadlock letter, and in the terms of the deadlock letter, that is supposed to bind them for the matter to be adjudicated on by the Ombudsman.
Yeah.
And they stated 12 months, up to 12 months to do so. So I thought, oh, that's good. I'll get on with life. I'll find a bit of time to research that, then put the matter before the Ombudsman with the deadlock letter. But that was issued on the back end of July 22. Come October 22, some people turned up in fluorescent coats with a locksmith hiding around the corner up our private farm access lane. Oh, we're from Haste and we've come to get access to your property. I said, do not consent. Don't have, what's this all about? Oh, well, Octopus, we work for Octopus, which is probably a bit of a lie. So I said, well, on what authority? Oh, well, we got this warrant. I said, you can't have I have no contract with Octopus, therefore, until that matter has been adjudicated by the Ombudsman, please just go away. So they sat and waited. No, will we call the police? I said, well, do what you want. I said, they can only come here and they can just supervise to make sure there's no breach of the peace occurs. And of course, their response was, well, oh yes, but if you stop us from getting in, that would be the breach of the peace. I said, no, I'm allowed to do that. If you then try to tackle me, that will be the breach of the peace, and that's what I'll go by. Okay. Anyway, I got a couple of people up who were, good, solid activists in our movement. One was quite well known, and this went on for a bit of a standoff. Eventually, they just disappeared. So we assumed the matter had gone away, but then the police came to see me on the night, and I welcomed them in because I thought I might as well tell them the story. And they sat at the same table I'm at now, made them a cup of tea possibly. And they said, right, we come for this to investigate this. What we've been told is you have removed your gas and electricity meters and your house is in a serious danger of explosion, and it's essential that these people are allowed in. Yeah, I said, okay. I said, can you look up? And I pointed at the light, and I said, there's electricity flowing through. So I said, there's definitely an electric meter in place. Oh, he said, yeah, okay. He said, well, what about your gas meter? I said, don't have one. What about your gas supply? I said, don't have one. So I went to my Rayburn. It's actually that way. And I opened the door of the furnace. It's on solid fuel. And he said, oh, this is amazing. Does this do everything? I said, yep, does cooking, does the hot water, does the central heating, and keeps the house warm and cozy. It's the heart of the house. All right, so you've got no gas. I said, well, why would I need any gas? I said, besides, you can't get gas up here at anything like a sensible cost. There's no point in even considering it. It'll be many tens of thousands. Oh, okay. So I said, I told you a pack of lies. Can I make a formal complaint so you can go and pursue them for wasting police time? No, you'd have to do that tomorrow with a different process. So I said, right, fair enough. He said, oh, look, we just mark this down as civil matter, no further action, closed. I thought, that's good. That should stop it dead for all future purposes. But it didn't, because in February 23, 10th of February 23, another knock on the door, and I saw this same chap lurking about outside. I opened the door, and the same kind of conversation. Oh, we've come, we've got this warrant. I said, sorry, not having it, please go away. Oh, well, we're going to call the police, and call them. So the police duly turned up. I got a couple of people come and sit with me, and just in case anything naughty was attempted. So the police tried to persuade me to let them in. I said no. I said I do not consent. Then the message came through, because I could hear them from outside. If you do not let us in to look at your meter, we will arrange for Northern Power Grid to come and dig up your electricity supply and cut it. I said, well, I don't see what authority you would have to do that. Oh, we've got this warrant. I said, well, it can't be correct, because had your applicant put into wherever court this was supposedly issued, and had they told them that the deadlock date had been issued, which would be the truth, there's no court who would ever say, well, yes, you want to circumvent that and basically obviate the point of the ombudsman, effectively changing law. So I said that can't be true. It was never showed to me or served on me. It was supposedly on an iPad or something. Anyway, Northern Power Grid turned up, and I just refused them any entry. And they said, look, we're going to have to go and dig your cable. I said, well, you can't. So it came to a bit of a standoff, and I thought, well, if they do this, I can't really stop them. And I did make a deal. Look, I'll let you come in, only one of you, providing there's no photographs taken of anything. It's simply, you can come and have a look to see everything's safe, and then you can go. Then they came, one of the police managed to push their way in, and I videoed the whole thing. And he then said, no, this is all wrong. You haven't got an authorized meter. I said, you don't need an authorized meter. You just need one, which is appropriate. That's all the regulations state. Oh, no, it has to be one of ours. I said, it doesn't. I said, well, we're going to have this removed. And this was the other people, the haste people who had been employed by Octopus to come as kind of galactic stormtroopers, for want of a better word. Mm-hmm. So I videoed it and I said, under great duress, I'll let you have a look at it. He tried to take photographs. I stopped him and I said, right, get out. So then they said, well, we're going to have to do something about this. Hayes then demanded that they were going to come and take the meter out and terminate the supply. The police said they would arrest me if I tried to stop them. I said, well, you can't do that. It's you're only supposed to keep prevent a breach of the peace. And I said, that will be one. No, that's what we're going to do. He's got the warrant. I said, he hasn't. And they wouldn't. It was a pointless. I might as well have been arguing with my cat, but what difference it would make. So I pointed out that, again, it was under duress. So when they had a look at it and they said, yeah, definitely wrong meter. We'll have to take it out. Blah, blah. I said, okay. I said, well, what happens now? Well, if you ring Octopus, they are the only people that will come within, it could be 20 minutes, could be 3 hours, to fit a new meter, and you have to make an arrangement with them. I said, I'm not making an arrangement with Octopus again. Oh, well, they're the only one that will come out. And then they pointed out that you don't have to stick with them. You can change it in 14 days to another official supplier. I said, well, all suppliers are official when they're covered by the Ofgem guidance and the Electricity Act 1989. You just don't seem to accept it. Oh, well, no, we don't. That means anybody could do that. I said, that's the purpose of the law, to let anybody make a small contract with a small supplier. It's meant to introduce competition and facilitate the entry of small. Oh, no, that couldn't be the case. Otherwise, we'd be out of business. I said, I can see where this is going. So I then terminated the video so I could they give me the telephone number and I ran Octopus. As soon as I got through and identified the property, the guy in there then said, we can't deal with you. You can only go to the Ombudsman. So we can't take them out any further. I said, yeah, but there's an emergency situation. They're threatening to cut me off. No, he said, we cannot deal with you. Now, the important thing is, and I didn't realize the significance of that at the time, they were basically admitting that they had no standing or status to be there. By saying, we cannot deal with you, you can only go to the Ombudsman, they're effectively saying, we have no authority to be here. I didn't quite realize that at the time. So I said, right, okay. Then the engineer of Northern Power Grid chipped in, Richie. He was quite a nice chap. He was obviously just there to do what his superiors told him. And just rolling the history back with Northern Power Grid, they really didn't like me because for a number of years I've been challenging them for other people where they've been quoting very, very high prices to put in electricity supply in or to upgrade one. The worst example was to a holiday lodge park where they wanted 54,000 or including their costs would have been 54,000. When I challenged them and took them on and for the client and threatened them with a monopolies investigation through Parliament, they backed down and the job was done for 14,200 or 300. Now that's less than a third of the price. So it shows you the incredible profits that these people make. And I pointed out that if you repeat this across all the house building that's going on and all the small people wanting to self-build and you're taking all these vast profits, I said effectively you're preventing house building being done and possibly jobs when times were quite hard 10 years ago in the jobs market. Things were barely starting to recover after the 2008 crash. So they backed down, and then I helped another 3 or 4 people to get much reduced costs on the supply when I challenged them every time. And I used to write to their chief exec and say, look, we're not having it. This is unlawful profiteering of your monopoly position. Are you going to do this at a proper price or not? And I can get a quote from another supplier to do it. You'll have to be competitive. And in all cases, they always back down. I had a few run-ins with them from our local power supply where we had an issue with a tree branch touching it one day and it was tripping out. And I'd made them aware of it and they didn't deal with it. And then it took 3 or 4 months until the power did trip out on the main fuses on the transformer pole. And only then by, making a formal complaint again, did they come out and put it right. So I feel there was an act of vengeance here going on in the background with Northern Power Grid. So I went on to say what could be done. And this engineer, very good, he said, look, in an emergency situation, and he said, I'll give you an example. A single mother has somehow caught her electric meter. She might have had a hairdryer next to it or something like that. He said, and if it's knocked the meter out, we have to put emergency on in while the one that the billing company, they're not a supplier of electricity, the billing company would normally use is then reinstated, but we put it in, it's a standard meter. So, right, okay. Can you do that? He said, yeah, I'll arrange that. So he goes outside, gets on the phone to his bosses, comes back in, yeah, there's a meter coming down, and we can get this done. So I said, well, there's no need for everybody else to be here, to hasten to the police. Oh yeah, well, we have to wait till the end to make sure there's, this is all done. I said, fair enough. About 40 minutes later, this new meter turned up, a large, baldy-headed guy brought it. He handed it over to the engineer. He said something to him, and he said, oh, I'll just have to ring back to the office and just check on this. So he ran back to the office and he said, oh no, I'm not allowed to fit it. I have to go and dig your cable. I said, but here's to remove my meter, or they've terminated my supply. They've taken out the two main power leads coming into the connection point. Oh, well, that's what my boss have said. Well, I said, well, sir, why can't we, you made an arrangement that if I didn't stand in their way, even though I could have been arrested, and they took that meter out and terminated it, so like you would provide another one. You made a deal, effectively a contract, a bargain, whatever. Oh, and I'm sorry, but I've been overruled. And of course, that's what their bosses were waiting for. Sending the meter down, I regard as a taunt, actually, a torment. So fair enough. So I thought, right, what we have to do then? And then another fabulous friend, a real true absolute warrior in our movement came. He was down helping me, and we came to look at putting a generator on whilst they were trying to find the cable. They couldn't find the cable at first, and they asked me if I could help them, which of course I didn't. So after several hours, their crew changed over, and because their time had run out, and they were getting the nighttime crew in. But a lot of resources into having a go at me. So my friend Phil, he came along to help me. And we looked at getting a generator set up. There was, I did have a small one, but wasn't able to get it started, and he was able to help with another one, which was barely adequate, but it took us 3 or 4 hours before we could get it in and connect it up and into a workshop I have, which is up on the outbuildings. And they'd all disappeared off by then, so this was getting late at night. It was February the 10th. It was cold. It was dark. We only had torches, and we got the generator running. And every time we connected it and put the main switch back on in the house, it tripped out. Couldn't find out why, but we did find there was a socket outside, an external socket that somehow it was putting power to that okay, as long as we left the switch off inside the house. So what I did is I plugged emergency leads into that. We fed them through the letterbox so I could keep the fridges and freezers on, and power the central heating pump, which of course was essential to circulate the water around from my Rayburn into the central heating system. One, so it didn't boil and cause damage, and secondly, to obviously keep some heat in the place. So that was that. Next morning, generator was still running, and Phil had arranged for a good electrician to come down. He'd had some experience with generators, and we spent hours going through and could not find why the generator would trip out. We put earth rods outside the workshop. We did everything, and even by we're all scratching our heads. But because I'd had some experience when I was doing site engineering works, installing mobile homes, and knowing that their earthing system was different, I looked at this. The main live and neutral were disconnected, and they were blanked off, I think, or disconnected, left to two ends inside the house, and the power cables cut outside. So I looked at where the earth lead was running through the connection point, and I said, you know, caravan sites are different on earthing. Could it be something to do with the way this earthing is? And a dawning realization came over his face, and he said, "Oh, he said, this is a something, 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 TM and P or something type of earth." And he said, "But the generator will be different." So he disconnected the earth, and lo and behold, this is the internal earth from the earthing point that went back outside through the mains. And lo and behold, the generator stopped tripping out. So we put another earthing rod outside to then earth the house into to make it safe. And we managed to get it on. Went away, and then later in the day, I found I was getting electric shocks off the water taps. And I thought, this is odd. They weren't fatal, obviously. But you get a significant shock when water was running, you're washing your hands, and water's running off, and you're getting quite a shock at the focused point. And similar in the shower if it ran off your elbow. So I talked to him, and he came back, and he then bonded the water pipes and ran a new earth cable through to join it onto the earthing rod he put outside. Excuse me 1 second, I just gotta have a drink.
No worries, yeah.
So he did that. It's possible that the shocks went down to some extent, but they didn't disappear altogether. But there was a time when, being in the shower and water running off that most intimate part on a man, I got a shock there as well on my male organ, one of my favorite organs. Now, that was, quite disturbing, and I had to be very careful in the shower after that point. I had to make sure that when water was running down me, it was continuous so that I wouldn't get a sudden shock. While this thing's unbelievable, but it was plain unvarnished truth. It was happening, and anybody else who touched the water taps were getting the same sort of thing. We never really solved it. Just have to take precautions against it. So shortly after that, I then went to take what I thought was a very simple claim out, which it's called a specific performance injunction, and I attached to it a claim for damages for this aggravated trespass onto my land to cut my own cable without any authority whatsoever by Northern Power Grid. And I attached a claim of about £8,000 to it. It might have been a bit more than that because there was the time for the sparky and other things as well, fuel for that, what I thought was only going to be a few weeks. And went into court. There's a few strange things happened in court. So there was an army of lawyers. They brought a barrister from Northern Power Grid, and they persuaded the judge effectively that they were right and I was wrong. But I came to realise that the barrister is generally regarded superior to a judge. A district judge tends to have been a solicitor, and they don't know all the law, and they're not normally confident in presenting law to a court. But a barrister is trained in advocacy, and he's meant to research the law part of it into the case law in a very deep way. There's a few disturbing things. First of all, I raised the point that there's no warrant had ever been produced, and that should really render the whole thing invalid. I made a point of a Lord Denning case from 1956, where fraud unravels everything. If they didn't have a warrant, then that's the matter should drop. So the judge said, yes, of course. Yes, well, where is this warrant to the other side? Have you actually got it? Oh, yes, we have it here. Oh, well, can you email it in? I thought, well, I haven't seen it. That's a bit unfair. So they emailed it in, and it was emailed over to me at the same time. Now, I'd put in video evidence the day before. I'd put in a bundle of documents. And as the hearing dragged on, it became obvious that we were talking from different bundles and page numbers. And so at one point I said, the judge said, well, I haven't got a page number so-and-so, or that's not the same here. I said, well, it's the bundle which is headed. It was dated the 23rd of February to be for the case hearing on the 24th. Oh, no, I've got the one for the 16th. I said, well, that's when I went to get a single party, or it's called an ex parte hearing, where I put such a case of danger to life and limb and to farm animals and welfare of all, that there should be an immediate reconnection because it was all done fraudulently, and that the needs and outweighed anything else. But the judge wouldn't give me that at the time. So the bundle I prepared for that, I expanded on with quite a bit of stuff and some witness statements in from a couple of people who were with me on the day. And that kind of dragged on. And I said, well, this is wrong. My bundle isn't. Oh, well, yes, but you were talking about this document. You said you'd emailed the chief executive of Northern Power. I said, yes, I did. I said at 12:56 and then at 13:20 or something like that. And I got it, and I just read it out. And I said, you must stand down. And I explained why I've made an alternative contract. I sent a redacted copy of my contract for my new supply. I said, you have no authority to be here. So the judge, oh yeah, okay then. But then the barrister took over and just basically coerced and sidelined the judge in to talk about, oh, the very high voltages and people shouldn't be meddling. I said, I don't know if you've read the paperwork, but I said, it's only 240 volts. I said, these aren't high voltages. I said, you're exaggerating. Oh, yes, but even any voltage can be dangerous to people. I said, well, it's an authorized, not an authorized, it's an approved meter. It's got a CE mark on. It's used by hundreds of thousands of properties all over the country. And it's approved to be do so. It's CE approved and everything. Oh, well, I don't accept that and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So then he talked about, he went into great length about the duty of the suppliers, and they can come and terminate supply under this, that, and the other reason. And I said, but this is all wrong. They had no status. Upshot of it all, it was ruled against me. I was denied the opportunity of this injunction to make them reconnect. But then the worst part came when I'd started to claim off for 8.5, 8.7 or something, which was under the £10,000 limit for a small claim. And they started talking about costs. I said, well, there can't be any costs. This is a small claim. And the judge, he said, it's unallocated. Straightforward, a great, well, call it an error or whatever in procedure, or a deliberate error. It was regarded as unallocated, which means they could deal with it from the position of costs. And they tried to get 17k against me, but the judge knocked it down to 12 and suggested that I should think long and hard about taking it any further because costs could really rise, as I've seen. I thought, all right, okay. But this is still wrong. So the matter ended there. And then I appealed it. Now, this is where things got really interesting with the local court. I just thought I would be dealt with fairly. And I was ordered to obtain a transcript, which is again more cost. So I obtained transcript. And it's all in gobbledygook where you have to get a transcript, but then I applied for a transcript of the whole hearing, but you then have to get the whole the approved judgment is considered as a separate document. And when it came through from the transcription company, I hadn't realized it was meant to be dealt with separately because it doesn't actually say so. It doesn't specify the difference between the two. I'm drying up, so it was put in, and I'd sent it to the other party, and then the circuit judge looked at it to whom it was being appealed to, and came back with another order. Oh, but I don't understand where the other party they seem to have seen the transcript, but it's not on the court file. You have to file this transcript by so and so date. So I took a personal letter over to the judge in an envelope, which I hand delivered, and I put references in to all the paperwork which seemed to have gone missing, and I put a link to the transcript where it had already been emailed into the court, and I just raised questions. It seemed highly peculiar. He didn't get that letter, strangely enough, or not unsurprisingly. And there was another order came out. If I don't do it by June last year, my case would be struck out. Then it dawned on me that emails I've been sending to the court were being filtered out of my file. So I then started making noise. I made complaint after complaint after complaint about the court and what was going on, and that they were deliberately filtering things out. I copied in Martin Geddes as he was at the high end of IT work, having previously worked on redesigning architecture for the web. and I blind copied into some and open copied him into others. So you could see that if he'd received it, it's obviously pretty certain that the other party had received it as well. And if they weren't issuing auto acknowledgements, it seemed to have been done to deliberately prevent my emails going in and going on the court records. So somebody could be choosy, a bit selective about what happened in the court. So the appeal came up, the first appeal came up, and I think I won that one. There was another appeal against, there was an application to strike me out by Northern Power, which was lost. The judge was very fair, female judge, can't remember what her name was. Then there's another hearing, and it all came down to service of documents being sealed. I put them into the court to be sealed and sent out, but they said I hadn't done it in time, and they hadn't had a sealed document, so that went on. And that's kind of still outstanding. That I had to appeal that again, and it went on until my first appeal came up in front of the circuit judge again. They'd made errors. He'd apologised. The court had apologised. They even paid me a piffling £150 compensation off their own volition, which of course I accepted without prejudice, because I may very well have a claim against the court and tribunal service at some point. It's quite a deep matter, this. So we went to a hearing. Oh, there was a court order came out where permission to appeal was refused, but I could apply for an oral hearing within 7 days, which I did. And then this oral hearing was set for the 30th of November. So I'd been helping Martin get us with a case he's got against TV licensing. I've done a bit of support work and background work on document filling and this kind of thing. And I invited him along to the hearing on the 30th, and a couple of other good friends who were good activists, very well known in the movement. And we went along to this hearing on the 30th of November. To say it was a travesty was an understatement. It started off, the judge was a bit sarcastic to begin with when I'd said, oh, are we ready for me to begin? And, oh, well, there's nobody else here, is there, kind of comment, which kind of unsettled me a bit. And I started to talk, and he cut me off 3 or 4 times. And I thought, I'll let him do it once or twice more, and then I'm going to say, are you going to let me talk, or are you trying to simply talk over me and shut me down so that this matter doesn't go anywhere? But I didn't quite have to do that, because there's something I said which suddenly made him think. So once I started talking, as I am now, I didn't stop, and I talked for about probably 10 minutes or more, and explained how they had no standing, and how they'd the telephone call with the ombudsman, and I had a witness statement to show that somebody else had heard that, and that they'd said, we cannot deal with you. And then this judge was looking, and he was fiddling through the papers in there, and I went and I spoke all the way. I said, and I addressed a few of the matters, and then he said something, and I started to talk, and he said, oh, don't interrupt me. I may have interrupted him, I'm not 100% sure, but he started shouting at me, I've allowed you to talk, and you shouldn't be. I said, oh, okay. So I kind of just kept quiet while he got it out of his system, and then I carried on. But it was quite unsettling, that, because when you get this, I was told it was actually an assault for them to do this, and it affects your mind, because you've suddenly got somebody attacking you, and it's a sudden direct matter, and it takes your attention off things. So I got my attention back on it. Then the judge had turned it round, and there was a point I made which he didn't like. I said, listen, the whole purpose of the deadlock letter is so that the matter can go, and the ombudsman can adjudicate, have I got a contract or not with Octopus? The ombudsman will decide. And if that matter wasn't to go in my favour, then I would perhaps have to go with one of the so-called regulated suppliers, the big companies, E.ON, EDF, those kind of people, whilst I could possibly try to appeal it, I don't know. So I pointed out, what these people did was, and I use the terminology, they brought in galactic stormtroopers to invade my property and just disregard what really was law. And I said, and if you, Your Honour, were to go in their favour, you effectively will be changing the law, and you will be obviating the purpose of the ombudsman. In one fell swoop, you'll render him impotent, or, well, no need to exist. And he just looked at me, and then he fumbled through papers, and he became adversarial. Oh, well, what about this point? And what about that point? And I was then in the position of defending points he was making, which I thought, this just isn't right. He's supposed to just listen to me and then pronounce whether I had an appeal or not. And I think I've certainly done enough, because he brought in what are called irrelevant matters. And every time he said something, I said, but they had no standing. And I was able to dismiss his point, but they had no standing. From the outset, I thought nothing else matters. It doesn't matter what size, shape, or colour of meter I've got, whether it's a homemade meter which would work as long as it meters electricity. I said, that's all irrelevant. They had no standing to come in, and they certainly had no standing to take my own electric cable up. I said it wasn't theirs. And he didn't even want to get into that. So I said, we carried on for a bit, and he kept bringing these points up, and I made the point at least 4 times. They had no standing. And then he attacked me on 1 or 2 other things, and, oh, well, I said I didn't have a fair hearing on the 24th of February. My bundle wasn't in. The other party's was. The judge allowed them to email in this fake warrant because it had no authority behind it. I'd never seen it before. It hadn't even been served on me. And he decided the matter on that. I said, that's not a fair trial. It's against Article 6 in any event of the Human Rights Act, where there's inequality of arms, and they're bringing in matters into the court that should have been put in long before and should have been served on me. And then I said, the other point was, yes, of course, they didn't have my bundle. And he just seemed to gloss over these. So he went through, oh, well, they must have had your bundling with them. I said, no, that's not the case. Anyway, we spoke for a bit longer. Look, I've given you nearly an hour. As though he was doing me a favour. Well, I think the law permits. He's a public servant, and he seemed to forget that. And it went on for a bit longer. And he said, right, have you got anything else to say? I said, yes. I said, you now have the opportunity to do the right thing. The spotlight is on you. Thank you. And I left it at that. Oh, no, sorry. Let me go back a bit. Here's where the point of the earth came in. So Martin had interviewed me because he's written 1 or 2 articles about this situation and this great injustice and corruption, basically, in the court and everything else. And it was just before this hearing when he came through to check over some detail so he could write his next article. And it was suddenly at that point we realized that the earth was connected next to my meter, but it was an illusion of having an earth, because once they cut the main cable, the earth that was embedded in that, or however it's connected, was suddenly gone. So there was no earth from the property, and that's why I was getting electric shocks. So I made the point that they came in with a warrant, and I said, it's on video. I asked him if he'd seen the video, and he said no. No. And I said, well, I said, perhaps it's a good thing if you were to look at it, but I said, their reason for coming in was a safety check. I said, they left the property in a lethal condition. And I said, for me to experience the electric shocks off my hands, off my elbow, when washing, and I said, and forgive me, because there's no other way of saying this, but off my penis in the shower. And the girl who was actually dealing with the recording mechanism, she looked up, a bit surprised. I said, for this to happen, I said, and leave the house in a lethal condition, has to be criminally negligent, violating the very foundation of all health and safety legislation and principles. That didn't faze him at all. That was halfway through, by the way, or 3/4 of the way through. And I made the point at the end. He just disregarded it. And after I'd said, the spotlight is on you, it was like dealing with somebody soulless. He just went straight into his judgment, appeal, permission to appeal refused. Now, we were all flabbergasted, and he just got up and went out. So naturally, we considered the matter, and I raised a formal complaint against this judge with the JCIO, that's the Judicial Conduct Investigation Office, I think it's called, on the basis that he talked over me. He can't complain about the nature of the hearing, only about his conduct. The fact that he shouted at me, the fact that he was sarcastic, was not the conduct one would expect of a judge. So I put that, and he had to recuse himself out of any further proceedings that might be ongoing and transfer it to a different court centre where he wouldn't be involved. He also had to recuse himself from Martin Geddes' case, where he had refused permission to appeal for a similar matter. No standing, the TV licensing people, which anybody can look up Martin's articles on his Telegram channel or Substack and see the detail that he's put into that. So we analysed this, and it was very difficult to look into what could be done. So I put the complaint in and then looked at how can I take it further. So I appealed it to the Royal Court of Justice, and I found some mechanism where if there's a great injustice, they can then look at it and reopen the matter. So I applied, and then they came back and said it didn't fit the circumstances or something. I said, well, but this is what it says in CPR 52.30, I think it was. Blah, blah, blah. They came back, but that's one of our appeals, not one of from there. I thought, well, how could that be any different? Just seemed bizarre. But it may be that there's different procedures for one that has already been heard by the High Court, whereas this hadn't, and this was an appeal from a county court up to the High Court to get reopened. And so generally they said there's no room for reopening, but there is. So I looked, and there is, however, judicial review. So I applied. It left me a little time, but I managed to get it done by the last day, which was 29th of February this year. I got it in 10 to 4. It was accepted by the RCJ, Royal Court of Justice. And normally it would have gone up to Leeds, but I said it mustn't go to there because this particular judge at our local court centre was on that particular circuit, and it couldn't be the case where he may know people, because he'd obviously have it in for me having made a complaint, one would think. Certainly from his conduct in the case, he certainly wasn't using his judicial mind, and he wasn't acting in an impartial way. So it went up to Manchester, and it's sat there now waiting for a transcript, which I've gone and applied for myself. I'm waiting for the approved judgment part of it, which I now know how you deal with that. But this has to go to that particular judge, and he must have had it now for 6 weeks. He's obviously sat on it, I'm guessing, I may be wrong, but purposely delaying matters so that it causes me a problem. So I've now been on a generator for since what's that, a year and February, March, April, May, 3 and a bit months, 15 months, having to get fuel constantly, service it constantly. I've got this cost order against me, which hasn't been paid. They are attempting to enforce it. Not sure what's happening there. And I can't let this matter drop. It has to go through judicial review. And there may be significant kind of costs issues there. But what I've learned is, and I do help quite a few other people throughout the UK, and some quite high-profile names as well where I can. The higher it seems to get up these courts, the more chance you've got of a fair hearing. When the spotlight's on them, they have to be seen to be obeying the law. And it's not satisfactory for a senior High Court justice or somebody who deals with judicial reviews to say, we disregard standing and we disregard the fair trial matter. I think that they really have to, well, it would be criminally corrupt if they were to, I know we've had some bad decisions, but the higher it goes up, there have been some good decisions. And the example of that is Leighton versus Bristow and Souter, who he took on these kind of enforcement agents, and he got a judgment for £4,000 against them. And there are some of these judgments across the country. There was one in Wales, I think, which is under the same kind of court system, England and Wales High Court. I can't remember the name there, but they got judgment against something to do with council tax. And there's been one or two good judgments. I think it was, it's along the M4 corridor, one of the main towns along there. There was a major case which went against the council tax people. And all these things seem to be connected together.
Yeah, there's another case as well that one of our group has just won, and he's just waiting for the actual official paperwork to come through now. And he was similar. What it was on him, the bailiffs actually come and clamped his car, and it was on finance, and but very similar sort of like attitude, shall we just say, coming from the actual enforcement agents, if you want to call them that. And also the police, where they just like, no, we support them 100%. And basically you can prove that it was completely and utterly wrong. And he had to go all the way through, right up until the High Court, before they actually used not only the common law, but common sense.
Yeah.
And found in his favor, but which was just last month. So you haven't actually got the this will be he was quite chuffed with it, because he'll now have a case law with his name on, against, he actually did it against the court themselves, because they apparently have given him the authority of the order.
Well, that's what my judicial review is actually against the local court centre. But I believe the whole system is collapsing, because having seen what went on in our local court centre, and when we were there, one of the ushers who our friends knew, they disclosed that there was at least 4 ushers. These are the clerks who go in and out of the court and take people in and out and do various things. There was at least 4 looking to leave, because they were fed up with the injustices that they could see going on, where they'd been sat and they'd heard people talking, and the judges had gone against them. But I think you're right. As it gets up the higher system, there's another one. It was Lisa Ferguson versus British Gas in 2009. And anybody should look that one up, because Lord Justice Jacobs, I think it was, or Jacob, he made the ruling against British Gas. And this was right up to the Court of Appeal. But they were going to take it to the Court of Appeal, but the judge's indications were you'd be on a hide into nothing. And there was a preliminary point about the way British Gas had done it. She'd moved supplies or something. I can't quite remember the detail, but they'd harassed her. And British Gas, it's laughable really, because they were saying, oh yes, but this was just a computer-generated letter. There's no human accountable for this. And the judge said, I don't know where British Gas get their thinking from, as if they're trying to, abrogate any liability and responsibility onto a computer, when it's garbage in, garbage out. If a human is responsible to program it, then the human must be responsible for what comes out the other end. And he pronounced Lisa Ferguson as one of the true heroes of the common man, if you like, who took this on a great personal risk and great chance of costs and ruination, really, which is similar to me, if things were to go against them. And a champion of the people. Well, I thought, that's not the way I see it. If everybody did this now, the system would collapse tomorrow. And it is possible for people to do it. It's a long, hard path to learn it, and they do not make it easy. They have different forms for appeal, and if you get the wrong one, it's struck out. I'm just helping somebody at the moment with, it's a horrendous matter. There's a gag order in place on it, because it involves the family kind of thing. But to see how little they had to go with against this individual, and we've now got it running in our favour because of just by sheer luck. I found that you have to put an acknowledgement of service, and this was a different type of claim. It was a Part 8 claim, and if you don't do it within 14 days, you then can't challenge the jurisdiction of the High Court in the matter. But they don't tell you that. And I thought, I wonder if this is the same as a normal Part 7 claim. And I looked it up, and sure enough, you have to get it in. Then you've got 14 days to challenge the jurisdiction, which we've done and put into strikeout orders and all the evidence in the world to get it struck out. In the meantime, there's 2 or 3 court orders come out, which are heavily against the individual involved. And these judgments, I mean, there's a King's Bench one, which went against council tax, I think. No, it went against warrants. But you can't get a copy of the judgment because it was done privately. There's no kind of official judgment. And I've written to the Royal Courts of Justice to try. I've written through 3 or 4 different channels, hoping to trick one of them, but I can't get it. It was published on the which one? Not Beat the Bailiffs, Peacekeepers channel, I think, something like that. And they stated the number. So the King's Bench Division did agree that it was valid, but they couldn't release the detail. But I think there's now these cases are coming together. I think there was a good judgment in Liverpool against council tax collections and bailiffs and this kind of thing. And as more and more people learn this stuff, it is becoming, there's more and more pushback all the time. And we've heard from our local council tax place that they're inundated, they've never received, they can't cope, they don't have the resources with the pushback that they're getting. And it's only getting worse year by year by year. And you know, one of the defenses against it is that the Terrorism Act 2000 Section 3, I'm not allowed to pay you because you inflicted terrorism on the general public with the COVID scam. Well, COVID, the government said it exists. Sorry, but it's proved not to exist. But aside from all of that, there's 2 clear things. There was never any risk to children. Yet you imposed mask wearing on all the children in all the schools. You imposed mask wearing on all your own employees, and masks, you did do no risk assessments to decide if masks, A, were effective at an invisible enemy, which was minuscule compared to the, you know, the pores on the mask like this. And the virus is like this kind of, you know, it's like a tiny pin. It's a pin going through. But not only that, there's no risk to children, but you've imposed the mask wearing on them. What you've done is you've imposed terror on a generation of young children. There's no call for it. And therefore, it might be the inconvenient truth. It might be uncomfortable, but by every definition, you've imposed terrorism on the general population. And there's a one glaringly obvious fact. There was no chain of custody for discarded masks. They were just thrown on the street, dropped in pubs, put in waste paper bins. If that had really been a deadly contagious disease, they would have had people in level 4 hazmat suits going around with full forced breathing apparatus from oxygen tanks to collect all these masks. They wouldn't have let people go in pubs circulating just because they had a mask on, dropping the stuff around. They would have put them in, a bit like you do with asbestos, and like the sharps bags in hospitals. They're in special bags, double bagged, sealed. Each one's recorded. It gets collected by a secure courier, a truck which is sealed. It then goes off to an incinerator, and there's a chain of custody all the way through till whatever deadly contagion is then, you know, witnessed to have been burnt. So I asked the local authority, well, we've no risk assessments on masks disposal. I mean, you couldn't make it up. So right there, there's all these measures in place to protect people, apart from the most obvious and the most pertinent one. We just let masks drift about everywhere. And if this virus was supposed to be in the air, you know, you don't put fuel on the fire by letting a mask blow around in the wind, making it 1,000 times worse. So from that
do you not think, though, right, that, I mean, I've got no answers, by the way, but, you know, do you not think that they're actually trying to rub your nose in the stupidity of it, to do 1 or 2 things, to actually make you realize just how ridiculous the whole thing is, so everyone needs to shut up and get on with it, or to actually wake up the actual people to think, hang on a second, because it's so stupid, you literally could not make it up. You couldn't make a film about it to show the mistakes, if that's what it was, if it was real. But it's just so ridiculous that it's just nobody with half a brain cell could actually go for it and believe it. You've gone off there. It's just gone all silent all of a sudden. I tell you what, I'll mute you, and then you try and unmute there. So try and unmute again. See if that works. No, it's just gone totally silent. Let me have a look. The speaker, let me test the speaker. That speaker's working fine. Very weird. Can you still hear me? Okay, I tell you what then. Using the same link, if you go out and come back in and see if that can do it. Try doing that, because we've got at least, we need to get at least another 15 minutes or so to wrap up, all the information that we've been getting out of you.
Is that better?
Oh, yeah, there you go. You're back again.
What it was, I've got an external microphone thing, and I think it had just become slightly detached.
All right.
I'll just put the volume up a little bit. So, right. So, yes, an answer to your question. When you look at the macrocosm across the world, everything is just absolutely absurd. And just connecting the dots, it's like somebody is just letting the most stupid things happen to wake everybody up.
Yeah.
You really can't make it up. I mean, you've got, just rattle a few examples off the top of my head. You've got Richie, well, let's go back to the COVID scam years. You've got Matt Hancock, just as on the day, it was either the day before or the day after, he announced in July, I think it was 21, more restrictions. It was July 2020. Mysteriously, that footage appears of him groping the woman in the corridor. Now, that is secure footage. Nobody can get their hands on it. It's obviously been there to give people a heads up, as to say, whoa, what's going on here? He's groping some woman in a corridor, and yet he suddenly announced there are going to be more restrictions. So those restrictions were cancelled. And then I think he got took off the case. Then you roll it forward to December 20. Boris Johnson, it was on a Wednesday. It may have been the same Wednesday that the nurses threw all their uniforms over the gates and this kind of thing. Going to be more restrictions for Christmas. The very same day, it gets slipped out, the lockdown parties. And that was a major storm all over across the newspapers and everything else. Roll forward a little bit more. Then you've got the Matt Hancock WhatsApp messages. How does anybody get secure messages from a government minister? They don't just come out with thin air. All this stuff, when you add it all together, has to be done deliberately. So he gets totally discredited, even to the point of saying, oh, we want Project Fear to ramp it up. To the editor of the London Evening Standard, I remember, and it was, can you invent a new variant and we'll go along with it? Something like that. Now, then you roll further forward. What have we got? Clown show in British politics. So when they wanted to oust Boris Johnson, normally you'll get 1 to 5 ministers or MPs will resign or threaten to resign unless the PM steps down or unless they have I don't know what to do, a 1922 committee thing or something like that.
Yeah.
This time we had 55. Never been known in history before. Then looking wider afield, Kyle Rittenhouse trial, which was late 2020. Somebody's foot in the court goes through the floor. He's a squeaky clean young kid he's 17 with an AR-15. He goes to Kenosha, it was. Apparently traveled 21 miles, and they tried to do him for taking a weapon cross state, which you're not allowed to do from that particular state. But he happened to have it registered at his grandmother's address, which was in the same place, Kenosha. So he has it on his back going out, and there's all these pictures of him cleaning graffiti off during the day from the rioters that were on going out. This is in the summer of 20, I think, the summer of love, as they tend to call it, with all these riots were going on across America that the fake news was saying didn't happen, and yet everybody, all the citizen journalists were putting out that, well, that is worse than you can imagine. So the riots come back in on the night. So you've got him with, I think people are chasing him. He fires off his AR-15 to warning shot. There's then 2 or 3 people come after him. I think it's 3. One of them hits him with a skateboard. He pulls a gun, and that's when Kyle Rittenhouse shoots and kills the other one, and blows the bicep or forearm off another one. This is what's supposed to have happened. So he's on the ground. Apparently he had a forward action jam and he only had 3 rounds left. You know, the kind of John Wayne thing that happens. So there's this grainy footage appears in the court hearing, but it's poor footage. The defense then complain that it's, well, this is supposed to be high quality. Can we have the original footage to check? They have to get a court order. The original footage comes in and it's like on 4K or whatever instead of, you know, a tiny resolution. The original footage, when they blow it up, it confirms everything Kyle Rittenhouse has said. And on the first day of that hearing, the defense asked the guy, it must have been the guy who had his arm blown off, who had the gun, the handgun, did you threaten to shoot him? He said, yes. Well, that was it. Even in this country, that would be game over, released, no charges, it was self-defense. He said yes. And I thought, oh, that's it, the case. But no, they carried on with the trial. So all this was shown on this high-def video footage, but then they blow it up. What do you see in the background? And I've looked at this and laughed at it with many other people. There's a riot going on. So there's cars on fire. There's gunfire going off. There's people running around. And there's a rioter stood about 30, 40 meters back from Kyle Rittenhouse with his trousers down, getting a blowjob off a street hobo. And the camera just happens to be in the right angle to catch this. Can you actually believe that? It couldn't happen. So the purpose of the Kyle Rittenhouse trial was to show what's just happened in the Trump trial, a two-tier justice system where they go for the young, innocent self-defense. And in America, anybody pulling a weapon out to defend themselves against anybody else, probably except in California where it's a bit stricter, they've got a right. They've got a right to defend themselves. They've got a right to carry weapons under the Second Amendment. They took ours off us because obviously the government don't like people having that right, and it's never been in firearms law for a long time. Apparently it's still there, but they just tend to override it. You know, you have to apply for a license, you have to have these terms and conditions, and you have to satisfy certain conditions, which is fine. But in America, you know, somebody pulls a gun out on you, doesn't matter what happens, you're not going to get done. And yet there he was being prosecuted. And it went on for nearly 3 weeks. Will he, won't he? Will he, won't he? And eventually he gets off and he breaks down, all this kind of thing. 1 week later, he's laid back in a chair talking just like Jeremy Paxman, is it that TV guy, to some talk show host, like he's the most seasoned guy in the world. Now, he was a 17-year-old kid. There's no way he could go on a talk show and basically take over. So then somebody puts out, well, I actually sent a log of all this to some girl in America who was analysing it. And she sent back, Kyle Rittenhouse equals Noah Posner. Now, I'm not going to get into that because it's very controversial with, what do you call that guy, Alex Jones. But Noah Posner was one of the people who was killed in Sandy Hook. And when you look at them, there's a big similarity there, but I'm not going to get into that because that apparently is a settled matter. There are questions from the similarity, let's just say that. When you look at what's going on everywhere else, you know, you really can't make it up. And there's just so much clown show. So a few weeks ago, we've got Richie Sunak. There's some investigation going on into him, Sanders or something like that. You've got David Cameron, Lord Cameron, rushed through the House of Lords to get him a peerage to act as an ambassador somewhere or whatever it was. Then he comes out, there's an investigation into him. I mean, and now you've got, who's the other guy? Keir Starmer. There's now stuff starting to drop about him, been covering up the Jimmy Savile paedophile carry-on in 2009, where he was the head of the CPS, and he went and buried all the paedophile complaints and all the, oh no, it's not in the public interest to take it any further. Well, that's because Savile was connected with who? Best mates of a certain man named Charles, isn't he?
Sausage fingers himself.
You know, and look, another thing, you've got to expand this into absolutely everything. You don't just take the 40,000 foot view, you take the 150 kilometer view. And London Metal Exchange stopped trading in gold and silver in 4th of July 2022, I think. They own the London Metal Exchange. They've traded in the most profitable
two valuable metals for 270 years. And yet there's somehow, we can't trade in those anymore because of market volatility or some nonsense like that. Then you've got good things like Roe versus Wade overturned in America. Now, if the bad guys were in charge, there's no way would you and I be talking now. That's absolutely certain. Roe versus Wade, how many babies' lives have been saved since that was overturned on June the 24th, 2022?
Mm-hmm.
You know, now you would not get that through. And then the Trump trials, I mean, it's a farce. It's all got to be moving.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing sort of like what you said, it just tops off with the one line you said. It's just a massive clown show. You know, everything that you're actually seeing and happening, it's insanity, you know. But what I'll tell you what I'll do is we'll go back a little bit, and I want to ask you though about well, maybe it's not ask, but I want to highlight about the warrant side of it. So they've turned up at your house with this mysterious invisible warrant, because this also happened to me, by the way. So you know that's where we've got like a little bit of joint interest. So I actually the same type of thing. Anyway, I went out and said, "Well, okay, show me the warrant," and it's like, you know, it's like they're like this. Well, what's that? You know, come on, I want to say that. There you go. And it's like, so I actually did manage to get a photograph of the warrant, and then they're hiding it in the van. So if there was anything true and real, they wouldn't be doing. I mean, I'm like, it's a bit strange, isn't it? You know, and anyway, it's like as time goes on, they actually rang 999 on me, you know, to actually get the police there. I live in a tiny little village, and it's a little street. There's only 8 houses or something on the street. So these like 3 big police vans pull up, you know, and it's like the place is full of grannies, for God's sake, you know. And they've got the dog handlers were there. They had like the locksmiths there, the bailiffs there. 6 police come running down. I'm like, what the hell is going on? So I actually rang up the council. Sorry, not the council, the courthouse. So well, hang on, I'm just going to ring up this warrant then. So I rang up where it said Birmingham Magistrates Court.
Yep.
And I said, look, it's got like blah, blah. You got this warrant number there. You know, is that correct? And I just read it out. Says that the name says this. The warrant number is this. This is the address. No, that doesn't exist.
Oh.
That's the courthouse. Yeah. And I'm on the phone. I went, oh, okay then. So, and I says, like, the police, I says, they've just told me on the phone. It doesn't exist. They're there. It's actually got written on there. It was signed by, and it's just printing, Priti Patel. I goes, what, you think she's went up from London, like, out the House of Commons to sign it, do you? And he's going, well, they've got it, there it is. I goes, but it's not real. They've just told me on the phone.
I can make one up.
Yeah, I know. So I said, well, look, you speak to them. So here he goes, yeah, it's PC, blah, blah. So, and he was like, yeah. Oh, okay then. Oh, okay then. Oh, yeah, all right. And he says, get a pen, wrote down these numbers, comes back out and he says, oh, it's the wrong number. Oh, it's not the wrong number. It's the courthouse. He went, well, they've said you got to ring this number. So I looked at the number, checked it. Against that's Eon. He went, well, against what? Why am I going to ring Eon to find a warrant number? And he went, well, you know, it's like that's the number they've said. I went, so you're telling me that Eon, the electric company, right, no matter what they're supplying or not, they're allowed to make warrants? And this big taller copper walking past it, he went, yes. I was like, I says, you're off your lid. You're all off your lid, you know? And it's like, I did actually ring them and they went, no, not that name. I went, who is this? They went, why? It's like on the phone. And it's, I said, well, this policeman just told me the county court. Oh, yeah, we're the court. Yeah. Like, but it says on here, though, it's Eon. No, we're part of the court. It's just that absolute ridiculousness. So, you know, and then so what I'd done was I actually got an SCR, subject access request, and I sent it to the court. They come back and went, we haven't got any record of it. You've got to go to the Ministry of Justice. Wow. Tells you again, it didn't exist. Wrote to the Ministry of Justice. I've still got it in my filing cabinet here. They wrote back and went, no record of you whatsoever. Not of this name, not of this dress, not of this. They sit in Birmingham. This is Eon. right? They just got an office attached, very similar to the liability orders in the council. They just sit in an office, go stamp, 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 stamp. There's a warrant, there's a warrant, there's a warrant. Absolutely no due process, absolutely illegal in their world. Never mind, is it the law or all? It's illegal. It's fraud. But this is what's going on all the time. And you mentioned that case, or at least the precedent set in Liverpool, and it was the chief constable who said to his people on the street, on the police, you tell them bailiffs, or whatever you want to call them, from haste or whatever, if they have not got a wet ink signature on any of them warrants, then they're not getting in that property. So, you know, there is the odd win, if you like, you know, the same as what you're saying about Lisa Ferguson. You know, there is the odd win that we get against these lunatics, but you know, they're just getting away literally with murder.
They are, and I mean, the problem is, we could all win if we have the resources and the will to follow it through, because the police are apparently accountable individually. So I should really sue the 2 police officers who came into my house and stood by and threatened to arrest me while this went on. We should really, if everybody, I don't quite know what the procedure would be off the top of my head, but if we were all to take some kind of action where these warrants were analysed and the procedures analysed by the highest court or the European Court of Human Rights, something like that, where the whole process is, it will happen one day, but you know, the problem is the people who've got loads of money in their pockets, they don't care that if their electricity bills from £200 to £400 a month, they just keep on paying. You might get the odd one that will help, but they don't really want to take it all the way because it gets them out their comfort zone. So it's people like us who are at the bottom end, and like Lisa Ferguson and like Mr. Layton, I can't remember his first name. Wayne, that was it. And there's a lot of pockets throughout the country that are doing this sort of thing, but it's hard to find out details because it's like shadow bans. So if somebody puts a post out in Norfolk, it kind of gets restricted in their area. Mark Steele's found that out by, you know, some of the hits he used to have on his site or his channels, and they've been much reduced. It's gone down, yet he's supposed to have more people on than ever. And but we are joining up slowly across the country, and you now got the Blade Runners who are using the terrorism defense to get off. If they're putting weapon systems up, which are highly illegal and emitting, you know, immeasurably more radiation than is allowed by all the limits out there, it's a weapon system. It has no right to be there. And
the companies that are actually putting them up, all registered on Companies House, they're all fake companies. So I was in Cumbria a couple of weeks ago, and the guy was actually going, he says, you can all do this research. It's not rocket science. And this is all the list of the companies that are tied to putting up all of these towers left, right, and center. And then they go back and they've all been deceased, or they've all been shut down years ago. And the ones before that owned them. So a company owning a company being the director of another company, and they're all closed. So who is it then? So what they're doing is they're hiding, right, the fact of, well, who do you actually go and sue then if that's because they don't exist? They're not on Companies House.
Well, I think the starting point would be the councils, because they have duties under the Environmental Act, I think. Not, you know, bearing in mind, it's not just us that are affected, it's Ecocide. This is all against the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981. Every living creature is affected by these high levels of radiation from 5G, from these LEDs, which, you know, you've got pollinators and moths and all that dying under them all the time. So there's no food for the bats. That's unlawful straight away. What I like to use when I'm taking on, because some of the kind of work I do, I take on council enforcement people up and down the country for some clients. That's how I earn a bit of bread and butter to keep going. And I do planning matters and planning appeals. So one of the things I tend to do to make them personally liable, and these letters can be very powerful, it'll be, as no local authority, no company, no entity can be constituted so as to break the law, then when law breaking happens, it must be the actions or conduct of individuals. And thus they lose their umbrella protection and they become personally liable because they are deemed to be acting and are provable to be acting ultra vires. Now, when I put that in, it gets attention because you suddenly tell them, you know, there's possible, and especially when I'm doing this work for clients that have deep pockets to take on these people, we will take personal claims against them. And this is one of the ways forward. Private criminal prosecutions. What I learned only recently, apart from the CPS, who's the second biggest taker out of private criminal prosecutions? It's Virgin Media. And I can't remember what it's for now. Somebody told me. They have their own department. I'm actually helping somebody against Virgin Media at the moment, actually. But I didn't know that they were taking out private criminal prosecutions. Now, I thought that if you started private criminal prosecution off, the CPS just took it over. But I don't think that's the case. It may be another angle of attack we can use by spending a lot more of our time learning this stuff. So we can find out what is the mechanism and, you know, dig deep and say, can we insist that we run it and not the CPS? Can we take it off the CPS? Or another way would be, if 100 people took out private criminal prosecutions against a certain company, you tend to overload the CPS. They can only deal with them one at a time. And it may be that we have to get into some kind of guerrilla lawfare tactics in order to be more successful as a united kind of people, you know. I mean, we know it's all illegal. It's unlawful. It's against everything. And for the police to back up these enforcement type agents, it's how do you get past that level of Gestapo? Because that's all it is. It's a stealth way of putting Gestapo amongst people.
Yeah.
And
like I think you know, you need to speak to a friend of mine. It's Reverend Dr. Warren Lee Boyd. Now he's actually now establishing community care associations under the government legislation, where definitely, because he's based in Wales, the councils are held responsible for the care of the actual residents. He can explain that more, but when you actually create, it's called like well, it's a community care association anyway. It's classed as a private members association, but it's
I know the thing. I've researched it actually.
Yeah, and he's using them to actually go and get influence now and he's actually getting backed now by MPs as well. So and they hold. He runs a union. Okay, that's where he's come from. He's very, very knowledgeable on this. So you know, I think I've done an interview with him before about this matter, but it's very powerful. And this is the thing. And what he's now is he's actually getting an influence with councillors, and MPs, but it's all they're blocked in because he's got the influence of being the legislation that was brought in by the Conservative government. But it's there, and they have a duty of care to the actual residents. That's where they've got a duty of care, and they are failing left, right, and centre in their duty of care.
They are, and we can take these things against them. I mean, in terms of LEDs, 5G, these radar weapons, and everything else, they fail under environmental protection laws. Now, there's a new government office called the Office for Environmental Protection. It's only come into force in the last couple of years. I don't know if anybody actually knows of their existence, but you can report matters to them, which are environmental matters, and they will fast track action. Now, whether they're set up as a safeguarder to, you know, to pretend to deal with this kind of thing, or whether they actually set up with teeth, we don't really know yet. So that's one of the ways of dealing. Another one, I think, is an Aarhus Convention judicial review claim, where it's in the public interest and it's an environmental matter. And I think Mark's really right on this one, where they're failing and they haven't done an environmental impact assessment, and where we can easily show that all these ULEZ cameras are all the same design. And so where they have these extremely high emissions, which are dangerous to all life, it's not just humans, it's all life forms, forms, then that evidence can go forward. it's a bit time consuming, and people have to join in to do it. But where this gonna, I mean, Mark's done a lot of the work. He's got the evidence there. It's a question of basically taking his evidence, parceling it up in the right package to go forward with it, and then get it taken over by the process for running it. And the ultimate remedy is in the European Court of Human Rights. Now, I don't think they particularly favour the UK, because obviously the Brexit thing came out, and we're more likely to get a favourable decision if it goes that far. But it has to go through a number of steps first. I think you take it to where would you go for a judicial? Well, you'd effectively have to put a complaint into the local authority with evidence, and when they give a ruling, then you then take that to the judicial review process under either an Aarhus Convention, or you may be able to take it through this Office of Environmental Protection, do it twice. And if the judicial review fails, then you take that up again to the next level, which would be, once you can show there's serious damage to life or limb or to the environment or life forms, then it has to be regarded with the strength of evidence you've got, and it could be taken up again higher than that. That's kind of what I'd like to see some people doing, and it will happen in different places,
So I don't want to go on too long, because we'll get everybody bored of listening. The information is amazing, but I do know that people get brain freeze. But so I've got a not a personal question, but it's something that I've been dealing with, and just because you mentioned it just now, you were talking about you do a lot on sort of planning with the local authorities, and also you mentioned about the health of bats. But I do know that they have to be protected. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Under the Wildlife and Countryside Act, they're a protected species.
Is it? What was the name of it? Is it something like pipistrelle or?
There's. I think they're all named. There's 6. I think there's 6 different varieties, or whatever you call them, species of bats named. But there's a pipistrelle, and there's long-eared bat. I think there's 1 or 2 more. But they do have to be protected. Their habitat has to be protected, because as part of any planning application, where there are old buildings or trees involved, you have to get an ecologist in to do a phase 1 desktop appraisal first, and then if they find any, they have to have a site visit, so it's not strictly the desktop can establish if there's any old buildings or trees, and if there's nothing around, then they would then say, well, there's little risk. If there's some old buildings or trees which are considered suitable habitat, then they have to do a site visit, which costs a bit more money, 1,500 quid or something.
What if, there's a building that it's been quite newly erected, and it was originally agreed, right? And so, no problem, you can get that there on a farm, right? On a rural area, there's got nothing else around it. And then these bats have moved in.
Yeah.
Right. So they've left the bats alone. Fair enough. You're in there. You get on with it. It's for their animals. It's for sheep, actually.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden, I don't want to go into the background, because it's maybe a little, there's some contentious things there about maybe racism, right? So we'll not go in there.
Yeah.
But the council says, no, you got to knock it down, and you're not allowed to build it anywhere else on your land, even though they own all the land, and it's massive. But they've got these bats in there. Would they be any kind of defense to say, but there's bats?
Absolutely. There's somebody put out a post recently where they started putting bat boxes up in front of ULEZ cameras, and it's illegal to take a bat box down. And that's been running on Telegram. It's been running on Telegram. And what they do is they stick them in front of the ULEZ, and then, you can buy a bat box off online, anyway, off eBay or online suppliers. And they put a notice on, a warning notice. It is illegal to take a bat box down. Once it's up, that's it, apparently. So it makes the council employees not take it down. So one thing to do would be to, if they've got a little bit of money to spend, you'd get an ecologist to go in and just confirm the presence of the bats there, and that it's now become a protected habitat. And that would be a cost-effective. All right, it might cost you 500 quid. It might be double that. It depends on in the area and where it is and who it is. But I do know a few up and down the country. If it's north of Durham, there's a good one up there, and if it's a simple, if they don't have to do a big report where they're assessing, trees and they have to assess every tree and they check everything for, bat droppings and that kind of thing. If it's just a question of them coming in, looking in, but yeah, you definitely got bats here. This is now a protected habitat. That could be a very powerful way of doing it. And then you would serve that on the local authority with the extract from the law. There's the Wildlife and Countryside Act. There's other acts as well, which their own policies, their own legislation will bind them into not interfering. It's worthwhile a bit of research in that area.
Definitely, yeah. Because they're going to ruin this family's life. They're literally going to ruin his family's life, But anyway, I don't want to go in. When you clicked it, my head's spinning on there. But so let's go back to yourself, because we're going to have to wrap it up soon.
Yep.
Now, you obviously have been doing a lot of help for a lot of different people all around the country, not just doing your own thing, So you've done a lot. Obviously, you've had to fight your own case, which has been so corrupt against you. But then, which is really costing you a lot of your own funds just to actually live the way it is, because they've literally dug up the road and cut off what belonged to your family anyway, which should have had no right to touch, but cut off the power to the house. So you've had to go and live this way with the generators, and you've got to maintain the generator. You can't just switch it on and leave it. I mean, everything is so complicated. But then on top of that, you actually go and spend all of your time, your free time, helping other people all over the place. This is, I do know. So obviously everything is costly, and nothing, no matter what they say, it might all be fake money and everything like that, but it is needed to actually go and buy food and stuff like that, as well as actually go through and do research and everything else. So, what I want to do is to find out, is there any way where we could actually get others to donate to you or your cause to be able to help you continue, not only helping yourself, but helping others as well?
Yes. It's been difficult for me to do this because I did this not for me at all. I did it to prove, I actually thought I could find a cheap way, an easy way, blueprint and pioneer a better way of doing things. So I could and the intention was to go and approach farmers where they've got solar panels that are in a very poor contract, get them out of the contract and give them a load of domestic suppliers, especially where there's backup battery storage and that kind of thing. So I thought I was going to get over this in a couple of months, and all right, 1,000 or 2 for costs and everything else wouldn't have been the end of the world. It's not something I can easily afford. I was helped at the beginning, and honestly, it humbled me. There was tears in my eyes. There was a whip round at one of the local gatherings, and I got, enough to almost pay for a month's fuel, because it's about 500 quid for fuel and oil for a month, and obviously it eats into what I can do. I tend to, when I do help other people, there's a great girl down in the Birmingham area, and what I tend to do is say, I'm not going to do it for you, but I'll train you. The deal is, you train 5 others or help 5 others, and then we amplify this. And she's great. I'll just identify her as Ms. C, and if she sees this, she'll know who she is. I call her a warrior goddess because she's now fighting the system, and I've saved her from a credit card debt which they had. Her husband actually had. I managed to get the judgment set aside, and have helped it. And I now spoke to her only yesterday to do something else, and she's already doing N244 applications to help other people to set them aside. Fabulous. That's really, really lovely. So a few people have suggested I should really put out a call for crowdfunding or something like that. I was very, very, very reluctant to do it. When I got the cost order against me, I'm just trying to fight that, to kick the can down the road. But it is I haven't got that kind of money anywhere near in my back pocket, and it would be disastrous to me to have to find it should it ever come to the point of being ruled, and that might not be too far away. So I was persuaded to set up a donor box, which I did 6 months ago. I've never publicized it because it's hard for me to kind of accept when all I want to do is give to people. Although there are people who accuse you of being a grifter, when I can't say how this case would really apply, but they're very small-minded. They don't see the situation properly. What was explained to me, which has kind of changed my mind, there are a lot of people in our movement who, for whatever reason, they can't do direct action. They can't take the system on. They don't understand how to. But they've got they want to chip in, they want to help others to do it. And if I could be weaponized better to help other people, so if I have to go and help somebody, it pays for the fuel in the car to do it, and this kind of thing. Yeah, so I'm happy to make the link available, and it's there purely, I'm not asking it, say, if anybody wants to say, yeah, I'll chip into that. And one little point I would make, because I do chip into quite a few of the causes myself, and I do support other channels where I can. If everybody who watched this, or on any other channel where there's a link for somebody who's put out cost of, like some of the channels have secure service costing hundreds of pounds a month because they might be attacked, they're taken out by DDoS or blunt force attacks, this kind of thing, and they have to have secure service. That's not cheap. And there are those in the movement who say, oh yeah, well, they should be providing information free. Well, anybody can go and research it, but when they've bothered to make an archive and they've got all this information together and saying, you can do it like this, or we can help you like this, then yeah, they do deserve something, 100%. So I was told, look, there's many people where they've read Martin's articles about me who want to help, but they really do want to help because it's the best way of weaponizing people like me and you and others against the system. We've got great knowledge, and you know, I'm not. You lose the fear, you can just take them on. Bailiffs, who cares? They don't exist really if you fight them. So yeah, I've got a donor box link. I can happily send it to you to include. And what I would say, if everybody who watched it or anybody else at the channel only donated £1 or £3 or £5, that's all of our problems solved. You know, if there's tens of thousands of views, and I will not take 1 penny for personal gain, it will only be purely to pay for the expenses I'm paying and court costs. And I've already had a couple of court costs up to now for applications and different things. But you know, transcripts. If people want to do it, if everybody chipped in £1, 50 pence even, that, or whatever they want to do to help, I would gratefully receive it in the spirit in which it was given. And I would say, think of that principle for everybody else's channels. If you got a tenner, just put £1 on mine, put £1 on somebody else's. And if we get 50,000 people contributing in that way, the job's done. Mm-hmm. You can't leave it to 100 people to put out 100 quid or whatever, which is, you know, 150 quid. It's better if we all do it together. The system.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100% agree. You know, and you know, if anybody else does come up and they've got a funny attitude and say, "Oh, like grifting," and that, then that's their issue, no one else's. They've obviously got the problem, so let them deal with their own problem, and we don't care. We know, I know exactly the amount of work that's gone in on your side of things. You know, I know stuff that you've been doing, you probably never even mentioned, right? But obviously that we're from a similar area, so you know we work in a similar group, so that's why you get to know things. But listen, I'm telling everybody now, right? I'll get the link and I'll put it in the description. I'm going to put this up on Rumble as well as YouTube because I have a funny idea. YouTube might be a bit dubious about some of the things we've said. So at least it'll be on Rumble, and I'll go through the mailing sites and I'll get the links out there. It'll be in the description. So no matter how big or little it is, and it's up to you, you can go and do it if you want to, and if you don't, no problem. Do not complain about it though. If you like, we used to get told if you can't see anything nice, then don't see anything at all. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. All right. So take it from there. But you know, thank you very much for today, Andrew. I'll get this out, sort of like hopefully get it all edited up and get this done early for next week. And you know, it's been brilliant to actually chat with you, and hopefully I can get this information going out to more people, and then it's going to help you and help others as well down the line, because you know what you're doing, not just for yourself, but what you're doing for others is amazing. The same as you know, Martin as well. You know, I was like talking to him in Cumbria actually a couple of weeks ago. So again, brilliant work, and everybody like that needs a little bit of encouragement, not just the financial support, but encouragement, because sometimes it can get you a bit under the weather, the amount of work you take on for no reason apart from to help mankind.
Yeah. Well, going out at 11 o'clock at night, when you fuel your generator up, and you come down and you find there's a bit of water got in from somewhere and it stops, and then you've got to go out and bleed the system through. Then you get covered in diesel, so you've got to come in and get a shower again. and then get electric shocks on parts that you wouldn't want to get. I believe some people pay for that kind of thing, but it doesn't turn. You know, that is just the kind of thick end of it, and that's happened on more than one occasion. You know, and I have some support from my family. I have a wonderful, very close family member. He's an engineer, and he does help from time to time. But I can't expect him to come along all the time. It's unfair, and so that's why I can't really get away. At the most, it's been for a few hours or a day, but I can't enjoy the life I used to, where I could go and take their offspring, my family's offspring, out, and so, you know, to lose the frequent contact and the love of them, it is challenging. But I know we'll get through it. There's always a solution. And if you want to ever do another podcast with me, I've had an amazing spiritual experience, which people might want to share at some point. So it's a bit of a talk.
Most definitely. There's definitely a part two in the offing for this, you know. But you know, thank you so much for all your time that you've given, and I'll make sure that the links go in for everybody. So make sure there'll be a link in, you know, like for Andrew, so that you can make the donation, no matter how small. It'd be very much appreciated. Okay, but hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll put links in if Martin wants that. Sorry, if Andrew wants, getting mixed up with it, that to contact or whatever it is as well. Okay, so thank you again. Take care, and again, Andrew, thank you so much for everything that you're doing for everybody all up and down the country.
You're welcome. Love to everybody, and I'll see some of you soon.